Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. And in this update, we are going to check out QNT's price chart, and specifically, we are going to talk about the recent move down, which sort of kind of invalidated what we had in the previous video in our minds. But no worries, we are going to completely do an Elliott waves analysis and tell you probably we don't really have a whole lot to be worried about. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, we are going to first things first talk about this very important article. And if you got time, may I suggest definitely give this one a read yourself, because this is, in my view, a major announcement. Now, in case you don't want to and you're not really active on Twitter and you don't really follow blockchain news, you know what? That's absolutely fair enough. We are going to cover it in today's update, and you want to know today a pilot is launching in Frankfurt called the Commercial Bank Money Token, or CBMT, and this is Germany's major banks and digital industrial companies working on putting commercial bank money, basically we are talking about the money sitting in corporate bank accounts, onto blockchain rails. Now, the whole idea in here is that companies like, for example, maybe BMW, maybe Mercedes, you know the big names, they could eventually automate payments directly between machines, or maybe handle big corporate transactions on chain, but still at the same time manage to stay fully inside the regulated banking system. Now, the important part from our point of view is actually who is involved in here. We are talking about Deutsche Bank, we are talking about Commerzbank, DZ Bank, and a bunch of other enterprise clients, and that alone puts this in like a completely different category from most blockchain experiments. And there's actually a very familiar name in here. And if you read this article, you are going to notice this. They say that Oracle is going to provide the blockchain ledger and the infrastructure layer for the Sandbox, and this is exactly where Quant's angle come in. You see, the article mentions that the project requires interoperability across multiple distributed ledger systems, and that is not something Oracle does natively. No, Oracle handles databases, identity, and enterprise infrastructure. But when it comes to connecting different blockchains and linking them to legacy systems, well, guess what? Their main solution is actually Quant's Overledger. And this is officially listed on the Oracle Cloud Marketplace, and Oracle has already used Quant in previous interoperability setups. So when Oracle is selling multi-chain interoperability to banks, well, essentially Quant is actually going to be the engine under the hood in here. Also, we have this recent Oracle Blockchain Nexus initiative, which focused on connecting traditional rails, like for example Swift and Euroclear, to digital asset networks, and that system also lines up perfectly with what Quant has been building with QuantNet and their ISO 2022 compatible architecture. So essentially, even though the press release doesn't necessarily mention Quant by name specifically, every single thing in here in this project requires a standardization, number 2, compliance, number 3, interoperability, and number 4, cross-ledger connectivity. And well, these are all exactly to the T what Overledger is designed for. In other words, this article is actually screaming indirectly that we have partnered with QNT, not necessarily Oracle itself. So the short version is this. Nothing right in here in this article, by the face value at least, confirmed outright, but the technical links are actually very strong in here, and Oracle is leading the infrastructure layer at the moment, and Oracle's interoperability solution for banks, yep, you know it is called Quant, and CBMT's requirements fit directly into that stack. This makes, in my view, the connection very much logical and very believable. And honestly, this entire situation, in my view at least, again, you can have a different opinion, I absolutely respect it. This entire situation, in my view, is extremely bullish for Quant, because it actually validates the core enterprise adoption thesis in 3 major ways. First things first, the Trojan Horse strategy is clearly working when you are seeing these types of news. Quant doesn't really need to spend years knocking on the doors of every single major bank. No, and you might ask why. You see, by partnering with Oracle, they just get instant access to Oracle's global enterprise client base. And it's very important to understand that Oracle in here is the one selling the digital infrastructure solutions to institutions like Deutsche Bank and many, many others. And Quant's Overledger through Oracle is actually going to become the interoperability layer built directly into these deals. And this means Quant can scale at a speed that would be absolutely 100% impossible if they were to try this on their own without working with Oracle. Second important point, you see, in my opinion, this actually shift focuses on commercial bank money, not necessarily stable coins, and that, in my view, is a massive distinction. You see, the article in here directly critiques stable coins and highlights their economic and operational risks. And in case you don't know, stable coins is very important to understand. Even today, they actually represent like a teeny tiny fraction of global liquidity, while commercial bank money actually accounts for roughly, I think according to this article, it was about 85% of Europe's entire money supply. And Quant, well, they are, it seems like at least, that positioning themselves inside the infrastructure that moves real institutional value. And we are talking about that trillions and trillions of dollars that already flow through banks every single day, not the small crypto niche that a lot of people are talking about. I'm telling you right now, if Overledger becomes the messaging and interoperability layer for those flows, well, the potential volume going through Quant's powered systems is going to be absolutely enormous. And final point, you see, this entire initiative, in my opinion, completely validates Quant integration first philosophy, because instead of replacing banks or maybe forcing them onto entirely new rails, the sandbox in here is designed to work with existing deposits, existing banking systems, and also existing infrastructures. And this, my friends, is exactly what Overledger and Quant Network were built for, and they were screaming this from day one. They were saying that what we do is essentially connect legacy financial architecture with modern blockchain and DLT systems in a way that is absolutely smooth, number two, absolutely compliant, and number three, very much low risk for institutions. And major banks are showing actually that they prefer this integration model over the tear every single thing down and rebuild that approach that many other crypto projects right now are pushing. And that, in my view, puts Quant in the perfect position as the bridge between the old world and very much the new one. Now, let's talk a little bit also about the possible future implications, and then we are going to go on the live shot. You see, this is, in my view, where the impact is going to become very much undeniable, and the article makes it very clear that the CBMT project is moving from a simple proof of concept into a full sandbox designed for live institutional use cases. And this shift, well, it actually takes the entire system from theoretical to very much operational. And once large companies, I don't know, let's say in this case, for example, maybe Mercedes, they begin using automated programmable payments in real world environments, it is going to become extremely difficult to roll any of that back. And banks and enterprises get very much locked into the rails that they are already using. And that creates long-term dependency on the underlying infrastructure, which, guess what, in this scenario is Oracle plus Quant. So essentially, if this model is going to prove successful inside Germany, which I think is very much fair to say that Germany is essentially the industrial heart of Europe, it is going to become the template for the rest of the European Union and potentially, who knows, maybe even United States. And that means the CBMT could evolve into the official standards for tokenized deposit. And if tokenized commercial money is going to become a global standard, well, guess what? At that point, Quant's Overledger is going to have a serious chance of becoming the interoperability standard that connects these systems the same exact way that TCP/IP became the standard for data moving across the internet. And I know we are right now speculating way too much, but it is actually a little bit of fun. So you know what? Why not? And I actually forgot to tell you this earlier. Of course, all of this is going to have direct implication for the QNT token itself, because even though banks operate very much private licensed versions of Overledger, the QNT token is actually remaining essential for licensing, transaction validation, and also anchoring to the public trust layer. So if we move toward a world where billions and billions of institutional transactions flow through the Oracle plus Quant infrastructure, well, at that point, I think it is very much fair to say that the demand for the QNT token itself is going to absolutely 100% skyrocket. And again, in case that you are a new viewer and you're not really familiar with Quant, it's very important to understand that the maximum supply is absolutely capped at, I think it was about 14.5 million tokens. So essentially, you are going to be in a situation where demand is going up, but at the same time, supply is capped. Well, what do you think is going to happen? I think we can all safely assume that the result is price appreciation for the token. And guess what? That's exactly why I am so optimistic and bullish for Quant. And again, let me just repeat what we are talking about in every single video. I do believe that by the end of this cycle, we are going to get into a period of time where a lot of altcoins are going to outperform BTC, but those altcoins are actually going to be the one with solid fundamentals. Okay, I don't really believe that all coins are going to go up big time by the end of this cycle. That's why I'm actually actively searching for the projects that are doing something that actually matters, and Quant, guess what, is absolutely one of them. So fundamental wise, I think this is definitely a very important piece of positive news for Quant that probably not a lot of people are going to pay attention, but hey, if you are a QNT investor, you should definitely pay attention to these things, because I think these are indeed the things that matter. Now, let's go on the live chart and see what is going on in the short term, because we got quite a bit to talk about. Okay, here we are. And if you remember, the last time that we talked about Quant, I think we were right around these areas. And the idea was that, well, according to the perfect scenario, we have to start going up from these areas, because that perfect scenario to us suggested that maybe we are having something like wave 1 followed by a correction for wave 2 and then great move on the upside into wave 3, 4, 5. I think I actually talked about this on Twitter as well, and I said this yellow 5 wave up can be into a larger degree wave 3, correction for 4, another move up into wave 5. Essentially, in my mind was actually the possibility of having in this region a 1-2 scenario. And I think we said this in the previous video. We said the 1-2 scenario is going to get invalidated when we go down and take the lows down here. And unfortunately, in the recent move in Quant, we absolutely 100% did that. Now, I guess the main question to ask is this: should we right now in QNT be absolutely bearish? I'll be honest with you, I don't really think so. Why is that? You see, in my view, there are actually some very important gaps that were created as a result of this specific move on the upside happening way too fast. And I think the one on H1 time frame was somewhere around $74, and the one in H4 was somewhere around $77. So you might be able to argue, yeah, okay, maybe we are going to have another move on the downside, but whether in this whole phase down in Quant, we are going to take the lowest low in here or not, about $68.50, I think that can be up for debate. Now, as I'm sure you probably have paid attention, in the recent drop in BTC, which was quite substantial, in Quant, we didn't really do a whole lot. And to me, that actually suggests that bulls do have a good bit of power, and odds are we are not going to get a move on the downside in order to take the loss. And even let's say if we are going to take them, we are going to go like a whole lot lower. My primary scenario at least suggests that number one, downsides in QNT are quite limited, and number two, from these areas, hopefully we are going to get a bounce. And if I just zoom in a bit more, now I think we should absolutely change our scenarios. And I think my best shot at finding a correction structure in this whole area is if I say we are having something like an ABC in form of an expanded flat, which looks like this. This can be our initial move down into wave A, followed by a correction for wave B, which in it we are going to take this initial high and then a rather strong move on the downside into our C leg. And as you can see, in this phase, we are 100% going to take the low of our wave A, and for our sub waves, ABC into A, ABC into B, and followed by a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave on the downside into RC leg. Now, let's go on the live chart and count some waves. So, according to the bullish scenario in QNT, I think now makes sense to argue that probably this was a 1, 2, wave 3 now to about this point, followed by a correction for 4, and I think we can all agree this looks a lot like a clear-cut, beautiful impulse on the upside, and now, according to our primary case, it should be into a wave 5, and right now we are having a correction structure, and this can be maybe from this point, an A, followed by, is it actually a triangle structure? You know what, maybe it is a triangle to about this point into our B leg, and then another move down into C. This can be A, B, C on the upside, and maybe even this thing is going to be a triangle, because finding a 5 wave, I actually earlier went on some lower time frames. Trust me, finding a 5 wave in this specific phase up in Quant is quite a bit of a challenge. So let's say this is a triangle and then another move into C. And well, if this scenario is playing out, I think makes perfect sense to argue this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave down to about this point into a wave 1, correction for wave 2, another move down into our wave 3, maybe to about a bit lower, and then we're gonna have correction for 4, another move on the downside into our wave 5, maybe in order to reach to about, let's say, the $73, $74 area. And at that point, I'm really hoping that we have completed the sub waves for an ABC expanded flat, and what you want to see from these areas is a beautiful strong move on the upside without a lot of overlapping of the waves. And when I'm talking about that specific move, you know it, I'm essentially talking about having a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave impulsive structure on the upside. If I see this in the next, let's say, 7 to 15 days, I am going to be like really optimistic and say, yeah, you know what, maybe on a higher degree we are having a wave 1, correction for 2, and well, if this scenario is in play, what's next? Great move on the upside into wave 3, 4, 5, and I am going to repeat what I said in the previous 2 videos. We are at that period of time whereby every single optimistic sign that I see in Quant's price chart, I am going to be like really bullish, because altcoins from this point moving forward until, let's say, the next 2 or 3 months do actually have a habit of outperforming BTC a little bit. And whether we are going to have like an outright alt season or not, I guess that can be up for debate. All I have to say is this: I think in Quant we literally have the perfect mid to long term structures for a great move on the upside. So what's the reason for us to not really be overwhelmingly optimistic and bullish? I think since we are having great fundamentals and the structures in the mid to long term do suggest that this 4-year long-term absolutely boring consolidation pattern is coming to an end, well, I think we should be really bullish and call for some great moves up. But you know, maybe in the next couple of days we are going to witness something like this, maybe another move on the downside. Now, here's a very important point. What if I am actually wrong and in Quant this is going to be our final low? Well, in that case, I want to see a move on the upside in order to take this important high right in here about, let's say, $87.8. Now, why is this so important? Well, I think I saw some people on Twitter also talking about this pattern, because you can sort of kind of argue maybe this is a head and shoulder structure. Now, a head and shoulder is suggesting that bears are quite powerful, and when you get a break of the neckline, which in case of Quant, it's right in here about $81, you are going to have a continuation of our move down. Now, if we end up having a move on the upside from the current point in order to take this high, and I guess the first initial optimistic sign can be maybe taking even this high as well, at that point, you need to seriously question this possible bearish head and shoulder structure. Why? Because, like we said earlier, a bearish head and shoulder does suggest that bears are in control. But if we end up having a move up in order to take the highs, that is telling you, look, bulls now do have the upper hand and they are going to push the price higher. So where are the bears? The answer is they are nowhere to be seen. And that's why if we take the highs at that point, we should probably count on something like this, maybe even like a short-term consolidation, followed by some more explosive move on the upside. And at that point, I guess I have to argue that this is like an ABC flat, but the end of our flat is going to be right in here, and this is going to be like an ABC running flat, which for our C leg we failed to take the low of our A leg right in here, about $79.50. This is correction up, followed by an ABC on the downside. So essentially you are having, excuse me, a WXY in form of a flat and a zigzag. So you see, I am able to get the subwaves to work to about the lowest low if I want to say the bottom is in, but that's not really enough for me. I need to see some strong moves on the upside. And when I see them and identify the right structures, fair enough, at that point, once more, we are going to be extremely bullish. For now, based on the fact that in QNT, we went down and we took all the lows in here, maybe we should be talking about that ABC flat that I told you earlier, suggesting that this move down can continue a little bit more. And I hope I explained everything well and you understood what is going on in Quant's price chart. Anyway, if you found any value in my content, I would really appreciate if you like this video and consider subscribing to my channel and follow me on Twitter. And if you want more, maybe you want a complete analysis for your own specific crypto, or maybe you want to learn some decent TA in order to be able to make good money in the markets, you can become a member and ask me anything you want. And until the next update, I hope you have a wonderful time with your family and loved ones. Goodbye.